Hello and welcome back to Not a Tech Show. My name is Joe and today we're going to be showing you how to replace the fuel filters in this Nissan Titan XD. This is the 2016 model and it has two fuel filters. We're going to show you how and where they are and how to replace them today. Okay, and yes, you did hear me right. There is two fuel filters in this vehicle. There's one right here underneath that plastic cup there, and the other one is underneath the truck. Over here on the driver's side, if you go underneath the bed over here by the fuel tank, you'll notice that there is another fuel filter. So these newer vehicles typically have two, one in the frame rail like here, and then one up top. Here is the casing for the fuel filter. Here's the water and fuel sensor. And here's the tools that you're going to need. We've got a drain bucket, a ratchet with an 1.1/8" socket. That's going to work for both the upper and lower. And also there's going to be another socket that you need, a 12mm possibly. I'll show you that later. And here's a screwdriver. We'll need that for the upper fuel filter. We'll start with the lower fuel filter first. First, we're going to disconnect this connector. There's a little push pin here. Squeeze it and pull. Should come right out. And then what we need to do is drain the filter housing. And we'll take our drain bucket here, move it underneath that housing. And then you'll find a little yellow knob here next to the drain. You just turn it about 90 degrees to the left and it will start to drain the diesel fuel out of the housing. Now this will probably take about 10 to 15 minutes or so, so you can just leave it here and come back to it later. While we're letting that drain, I'll show you the filters here. So you notice that there are two different part numbers. There's a 41 and a 40. They are different filters that you'll need both of them. Now, I always recommend getting factory fuel filters because some aftermarket filters do not filter down to the appropriate levels of what is required of this truck. So also the factory filter will come with its own seal and instruction booklet too. So I've let it drain for about 15 minutes. It's still not quite done, but I think we have enough out of it that will not have a ton of fuel come out when we unscrew this. So I'll close that up, take our 1.1/8" ratchet, and turn it to the left. Now, it's good, might be pretty tight, but once you get it loose, you can start pulling it off by hand. Now this may happen to you, but it might not. If this shield gets in the way of the water and fuel sensor, which it might, it's very close. It's not at the end of the world, it's actually very easy to move out of the way. These three bolts here, you don't have to take them all the way out, you just need to loosen them just a little bit so that the shield moves back and forth enough so you can get by the sensor. So don't worry about taking it all the way out, you can just loosen it a couple times, and then as you see, it moves just enough so that we can unscrew the filter housing. Since we didn't drain it all the way, there is still a little bit of fuel that's coming out. Once you crack it loose, you can let it drip for a few minutes and then continue unscrewing it. Now the filter will likely stick up there, as you can see. So we've removed the housing and then the filter is still up there. We'll set that aside. Now we want to make sure that there is no debris inside of this filter housing. These fuel systems are very sensitive, so you want to make sure that this remains very clean. I'm not going to mess with it too much because it's very clean in there, so we'll just set that aside, remove the filter, and then let that drain in our drain bucket. Okay, now that my camera is cleaned off, I'll show you the housing here. See this seal? This is actually a one-time use. You cannot reuse these seals because they stretch out and you'll never be able to get them sealed again. So the new seal is on here now. You can see it's in that groove. It's nice and tight. It should come with the new filter in the box. Here's our new filter here. You see these 4 tabs up here on the top. We need to align those to the 4 grooves on the filter housing. Once you put the filter in the housing, it should be flush just like this. And then also, before we put it back into the truck, we need to lubricate the seal with some clean diesel fuel. That'll allow it to not crush the seal as we twist it back into the threads here. Then finish tightening it up with your 1 1/8" socket. It should come back to that same position that it was before, right next to that connector. Make sure it's pretty tight, but do not over tighten it because it is a plastic housing. You don't want to break it. So we'll plug in the connector, make sure the valve is closed, and the bottom is done. Alright, moving up to the engine bay, I'm going to show you how to replace the upper fuel filter. This one's a lot easier. It's really accessible. Just remove this cap here on the top with that same socket that we used before. And then the filter will come right out of the top once we loosen this all the way. You might hear a little fuel gurgling. That's okay. Let it gurgle down for a few seconds before pulling it all the way out. Notice that it's a little tight around the intake air assembly there. That's all right. We might need to move it out of the way once we install it. So we'll do a little inspection for debris here. Again, also look into the cup here, make sure nothing fell down in there. It's very important. Again, replace the seal. Notice how this one's very loose. It doesn't really hug it around that sealing area. It'll likely tear once you screw it back in. Here is our new filter for the top. Same like before. It's a little different style, but it still has a seal and instruction booklet with it. Alright, I've reinstalled the new seal onto the cap here. Notice that it's a lot tighter around that groove. And we'll put some diesel fuel on it before we put it back in. But before we do so, we want to put in the filter first. Now the filter will go into the cap first, and it'll snap into place once you press down. Now, what we need to do is move this tube out of the way. It's going to make it a lot easier so we don't hurt anything. Just with this little screw right here, we'll take our screwdriver and loosen this. Move that out of the way a little bit, and that's going to give us all the room we need to reinstall the filter without hurting anything. Reinstalled the tube here and tighten down the clamp. And then we're ready to start this truck. So since we took out all the fuel from both of the housings, it is going to be a little bit of a sequence to get this thing going again. And one thing that I like to do is, without starting the vehicle, cycle the ignition on and off a few times. That's going to allow the fuel pump to essentially prime up that system and push fuel into those cups. Do this a few times, I would say like 3 or 4 before you actually start the vehicle, and you should have enough to get it going. If not, keep trying it. It will essentially start to fill up those cups. After you've let it run for a few seconds, shut it back off and then come out and inspect your work. Make sure that we don't have any fuel pouring out from anywhere, from either housing. You'll know if you didn't install it right because it will come out fast. And you're done. If you liked what you saw today and made it to this point, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot. Thanks again for watching Not a Tech Show, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.